Mm. The first time I understood what it meant to be invisible, I was 9 years old, standing in the doorway of my father's study with the report card in my hand. 4 A's and 1 B+. I had run home from school backpack bouncing, certain that this would be the day he finally looked at me the way he looked at me sister. I knocked. He glanced up, nodded once, and went back to his phone call. My sister walked in 30 seconds later with a certificate from a spelling bee, 3rd place, and he stood up from his chair. I kept that report card for years. I don't know why. Maybe because it was proof that I had tried. My name is Claire. I'm a structural engineer. I design bridges. The kind that carry thousands of people across rivers every single day without anyone stopping to think about the math holding them up. I like that. I like being the person behind something that matters without needing my name on a plaque. My sister's name is Dana. She's 2 years older than me, and she has always known exactly how to position herself in the light, so that everyone else falls into shadow. It wasn't something she learned. She was born understanding it. Our mother left when I was 7. She and my father ended things quietly, the way some couples do. Not with screaming, but with a long, exhausted silence that eventually just became permanent absence. She moved to Portland, called on birthdays for a few years, and then the calls got shorter, and then they stopped. I don't say that to be dramatic. I say it because it matters, because it explains something about my father, why he needed one of us to be perfect, and why he chose Dana to fill that role. She smiled more easily than I did. She cried on cue. She knew how to make him feel like the hero of a story he hadn't actually earned. I learned to build things instead. I got a scholarship to study civil engineering at Georgia Tech. My father told his colleagues his daughter was studying architecture. Close enough, I suppose. Dana got a business degree from a school 3 states away that nobody had heard of, graduated with average grades, bounced between jobs, and somehow my father still described her career trajectory as finding herself. When I passed my professional engineering exam on the first attempt, something fewer than half of test takers manage, he said, "That's great, honey," and then asked if I'd seen Dana's new apartment, because she'd finally decorated the living room. I'm not telling you this so you'll feel sorry for me. I genuinely stopped needing his approval somewhere around my 24th birthday. I built a life that didn't require it. I had my work, I had my apartment in Nashville, and I had Marcus. Marcus came into my life the way most good things do, sideways, when I wasn't looking. We met at a structural inspection on a pedestrian bridge in Centennial Park. He was there representing the city's parks department. I was there with my firm. He asked a genuinely intelligent question about load distribution, and I was so surprised by it that I answered for 10 minutes straight before I remembered to be professional. He asked for my number before I finished the job site walkthrough. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. He did it in the most Marcus way possible. No restaurant, no skywriting, no audience. Just the two of us on a hiking trail outside the city, early on a Sunday morning, him pulling a ring out of his jacket pocket like it was the most natural thing in the world. I said yes before he finished the sentence. We set the date 14 months out, a late September wedding at a venue about 40 minutes from Nashville, an old renovated farm property with oak trees and a long gravel path that led from the parking area to the main barn. I had walked that path in my head 100 times before I ever walked it in real life. There was one thing I wanted. One tradition I held onto despite everything. I wanted my father to walk me down the aisle. I know how that sounds, given what I just told you. But there's a version of your father that lives in your chest separate from the real one, the one who was supposed to show up. The one you kept a door open for even after you should have closed it. I wanted to give him the chance to be that father. Just once. On one day. I asked him in the spring, 8 months before the wedding. I drove to his house in Chattanooga, made dinner, and after we ate, I told him what I wanted. He looked genuinely moved. He set down his fork. He said, "Claire, I wouldn't miss it for anything in the world." I believed him. I want to be clear about something before I go further. I had no reason to distrust that specific promise. Whatever his failures as a father, he had never promised me something and then broken it outright. Neglect is different from betrayal. I had experienced plenty of the first. I wasn't prepared for the second. The 8 months leading up to the wedding were the best of my adult life. Marcus and I picked out every detail together. He had opinions about flowers that surprised me. He wanted wildflowers, loose and slightly imperfect, not formal arrangements. I had opinions about the music. We agreed on almost everything, and when we didn't, we negotiated like adults, which still amazes me when I think about it, because I didn't know a relationship could work that way. My closest friend Renee was my maid of honor. She had been my roommate at Georgia Tech, had seen me through every hard year since, and had the particular gift of making enormous tasks feel manageable. She managed the vendor timeline like she was running a small military operation. I have never been more grateful for anyone in my life. Dana, my sister, was also in the wedding party. I included her because I thought it was the right thing to do, and because I genuinely hoped that maybe this, a celebration, a beginning, might soften whatever it was between us. I should have known better. Looking back, I can identify the exact moment things shifted, though I didn't recognize it at the time. It was about 5 months before the wedding. Dana and I met for lunch when I was passing through Chattanooga visiting our father. She asked detailed questions about the venue, the layout, the parking, the timeline, how many people were attending, whether the ceremony was indoor or outdoor. I thought she was being thoughtful. I thought she was engaging with my life in a way she rarely did. I was flattered enough that I answered everything. She also asked about our father's role. I told her what I'd told him, that he was walking me down the aisle, that it meant a lot to me. She smiled and said, "That's really sweet, Claire." It was the smile that I should have paid attention to. But I didn't, because I was happy, and happy people make poor threat assessments. The month before the wedding, things started feeling slightly off. My father called less. When I reached him, he seemed distracted, quick to get off the phone. I told myself he was busy, that he wasn't great at pre-event communication, that this was just who he was. Renee told me I was making excuses for him. I told her I was maintaining realistic expectations. In retrospect, she was right. 3 weeks out, Dana told me she might have a scheduling conflict the weekend of the wedding. Not a conflict with the wedding itself, she was careful to say that, but with something the Friday before that might affect her energy levels. I didn't press her. I had too many other things to manage. 1 week before the wedding, my father called me on a Tuesday evening. I was reviewing final floor plans for a project at work. I answered, expecting logistics questions. What time to arrive, where to park, whether he needed a hotel recommendation. Instead, he said, "Claire, I need to talk to you about the wedding." I set the floor plans down. He told me that Dana had called him in a state of distress, that she had a critical work presentation the Friday before my wedding, a make-or-break pitch to a major client that could determine whether her small consulting firm survived the next quarter, that she needed help, that she needed him specifically, to help her prepare, to be there with her, to drive with her to the city where the meeting was happening because she was too anxious to do it alone. I listened to all of it. Then I said, "When would you be back?" He paused. He said the presentation ran late into Friday evening, that they were already booked into a hotel near the client's office, that he was worried about cutting it too close on Saturday morning given traffic, and that Dana was really struggling, and that he was so sorry, but he didn't think he could make it in time to walk me down the aisle. I remember the sound of my refrigerator humming in the kitchen. I remember the feeling of the chair underneath me. I said, "You promised me." He said, "I know, and I'm so sorry, but Dana needs me right now." I said, "I need you right now." I said, "I need you right now. I've needed you for 27 years. He didn't have an answer for that. There was silence, and then he said something about how I was strong, how I'd always been the strong one, how he knew I would handle it beautifully, as if my capability was a reason to abandon me, as if the fact that I had learned to survive without him was his permission to keep making me survive without him. I hung up. I sat in my apartment for a long time. Then I called Renee. She said several things I won't repeat. Then she said several things I won't repeat. Then she said, "Okay, what do you need?" I thought about it. I said, "I need someone to walk me down the aisle." There was a pause. Then she said, "I know someone." Marcus's uncle, a man named Gerald, had been like a second father to Marcus since childhood. He was a retired high school principal. Calm, dignified, the kind of man who filled a room without trying to. When Marcus and Renee asked if he'd be willing to fill in, he said yes without hesitation. Then he asked what I liked to be called, whether I preferred a formal arm link or something more relaxed, and whether there was anything I wanted him to say to me before we walked. I told him just to tell me it was going to be okay. He said, "Claire, it's going to be better than okay." I cried for the first time that week. The good kind. I did not call my father back. I did not explain the change in plans. I moved forward. The morning of the wedding was the kind of September day that makes you believe someone is on your side. Cool and clear, the oaks on the property just beginning to shift toward gold. Renee had everyone running on schedule. Marcus sent me a text at 7 in the morning that said only, "Today is the best day of my life." I read it 6 times. I was in the bridal suite with Renee and 2 of our friends when Dana arrived. She was 2 hours late. She looked flushed and slightly disorganized, not the way someone looks after a high-stakes business presentation, but the way someone looks after a long drive taken quickly. I noticed. I said nothing. She hugged me and told me I looked beautiful. Then she asked where her father was. I told her he hadn't arrived yet. She nodded and looked away, and something moved across her face that I filed away without examining. What I know now, what came out much later, is that the presentation never existed. Dana had fabricated the entire thing. The client, the meeting, the hotel booking, invented. She had called my father in a manufactured panic because she knew he would respond to her distress in a way he never responded to mine. She had used the one reliable thing about our father, his need to rescue her, and aimed it directly at my wedding day. The one day I had asked him to show up. She had sat across from me at lunch 5 months earlier, asked every question she needed to know exactly what to take from me, and then planned accordingly. It wasn't impulsive. It wasn't even emotional. It was deliberate. But I didn't know that yet when I walked to the top of the aisle. What I knew was this. I was wearing a dress I loved. My flowers were wild flowers, loose and imperfect. Marcus was standing at the end of the aisle in a dark suit, and even from 40 feet away, I could see that he was trying extremely hard not to cry. Gerald was beside me, steady and warm, his arm linked through mine. And somewhere behind me, the door to the venue opened. My father had arrived. I found out later that he had, in fact, made it to the hotel Friday night, and then something had shifted. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was the fact that he drove there and realized the presentation Dana had described in such specific detail didn't seem to actually exist. There was no corporate office nearby, no client building that matched what she told him. Maybe it was just the long, quiet drive back on Saturday morning that gave him too much time to think. He left before Dana was awake. He drove to the venue. He arrived 11 minutes after the ceremony began. He walked through the door at the exact moment Gerald and I were halfway down the aisle. I know this because I heard the door. I felt the change in the room. And then, because I am human, I turned my head. My father stood at the back of the room. He was dressed. He was on time for once in his life. Almost. And his face, when he saw Gerald beside me, when he understood what he was seeing, went through something I had never seen on him before. Not anger. Something worse. Recognition. I held Gerald's arm more firmly and I turned back to face Marcus. I did not stop walking. The ceremony was everything I wanted it to be. We wrote our own vows. Marcus said things that made 3 separate people in the first row reach for tissues simultaneously. When the officiant announced us, the sound that came out of the guest felt like something physical. The reception was held in the barn. During the cocktail hour, my father found me. Dana was standing 20 feet away, watching. He looked like a man who had just done math he didn't like. He said he was sorry. He said he knew he had let me down. He said he didn't know how to explain it except that he had driven all night after realizing something wasn't right, and that when he walked in and saw me already on the aisle, already fine, already here, his voice caught, already so much better than fine. He didn't know what he was supposed to do with that. I said, "You were supposed to be there." He said, "I know." I said, "I don't want an apology today. This is my wedding day. I'm not going to process this today." He nodded. He respected that. It was the first time I could remember him responding to something I said by simply accepting it. What happened with Dana was not something I engineered. It happened because my father, standing there with guilt still on him, looked across the cocktail hour at his other daughter and walked toward her. I don't know everything that was said. I know that he asked her directly to describe the client office building. I know that she stumbled. I know that Renee, who had positioned herself nearby for entirely unrelated reasons, watched the conversation and later told me that Dana's face went through 5 different expressions in about 90 seconds before she settled on something that looked like defiance, but was wearing the wrong outfit for it. I know that my aunt, my father's sister, who had never particularly liked Danae, walked over and asked a clarifying question of her own. And then another. By the time Marcus and I had our first dance, Dana had left the reception. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't find me first. She just disappeared, and the space she left didn't change the temperature of the room at all. My father stayed until the end. He sat at a table near the back with Gerald, which was not something I planned or expected. I watched them talking at one point. Two men roughly the same age, having what appeared to be a real conversation. I don't know what they said. I left it alone. At the end of the night, when Marcus and I were leaving, my father hugged me at the door. He held on a moment longer than usual. He said quietly into the top of my head, "I'm proud of you, Claire. I should have said that more." I stepped back and looked at him. I said, "Yes, you should have." That was the end of the night. The weeks after my wedding, I did not rush back into a relationship with my father. We have spoken. There have been some difficult conversations. The kind where you say things you've held for 20 years and the other person has to sit with them instead of walking out of the room. He has sat. That's something. It's not everything. I don't know yet what it will become. Dana has not called. I have not called her. I made my peace with that faster than I expected, which told me something about how much I was already grieving her before any of this happened. What I know for certain is this. I walked down the aisle. Not the way I originally pictured it, but maybe exactly the way I needed to. Held by someone who chose to show up not out of obligation, not out of guilt, not out of a lifetime habit of confusing love with performance, but simply because someone asked, and he said yes. Marcus was waiting for me at the end. That's the part I come back to. Every other piece of that day has texture and complication and things I'm still working through. But the image of him standing there, that's clean. That's just true. He was there. He has always been there. Some bridges are built under perfect conditions with every resource accounted for. Others are built in the middle of everything going wrong, with substitutions and adjustments and a different plan than the one you drew up. But if you've done the math right, they hold just the same. This one holds.